Welcome to Smackey's Garage. Today we're going to be going through this Harbor Freight Central Machinery Sandblaster. We're going to be talking about the install of it, how I set it up, the usage of it, the modifications I need to make so that I could use it, and then a review of how well it's performing after a few projects that I've done. So this Harbor Freight cabinet's pretty good size for someone that's looking to do some small projects in their shop. I went to Harbor Freight looking for something else, but then I saw this when I was originally considering the bigger red one that they had, and I thought this one would be good for what I do here. Now, it's something that's not that big that if I did want to move it around, I could move it around, or I could put it away if I'm not using it. It's good for me that doesn't have a lot of floor space. Now, I went to Harbor Freight, I purchased this, brought it home, I took it out of the box, everything was packed really well, and then I started setting it up here. Now, it took me actually a few weeks to get this up and running in my garage because if you're familiar with sandblast cabinets or sandblasters in general, you know you need a lot of air and a lot of volume to be able to make them operate correctly. Or else it's just going to be underpowered. And I think you need about 9 cubic feet per minute of air at around 90 psi on to get this to work well. Now, for that, I was thinking, okay, I'll upgrade my compressor. Now, Harbor Freight doesn't sell any air compressors that are electrical power that actually put out that output. So even though you can buy this at Harbor Freight, you can't buy a matching air compressor to go with it to run it. So you need to do something else. So into that journey, I started with my California Air Tools compressor. I put it in the other garage and then I came back here. I was able to get this other Craftsman compressor that can do the air capacity that I need. It is a 240 compressor. I just needed to plumb everything up and make everything work to get this to function correctly. Now, to get this to function correctly, I needed to get a new regulator because I didn't have one. The one I had wasn't good enough for something like this. It is built into the air compressor over there. So I ended up picking up this regulator down here, which is a pretty nice piece. And I ended up taking some time to get the plumbing fittings right to get it all kind of set up. Now, the way that I'm running it right now is I'm running directly from the output of this regulator to the back of the cabinet. And I'm doing it that way because it's the shortest path. You want to get the most air through there. You could run it through a longer hose, but you're only going to get more pressure drop. I'm running this hose, but it's probably still on a little bit on the too small side, but I think I'm okay and it's been performing well so far. Now, the only thing that's not ideal with my setup is, you really should have a separate regulator for one of these if you're going to be using it more often. The way that this is set up, I put a quick disconnect in the back so that I can easily take it on and off and disconnect this line without having to put a valve in there. Keeps everything looking clean here, but it's working for me right now. It's probably not the final setup that I'm going to be using on this, but it does work. Now, for the setup of it, wasn't that straightforward. The instructions that come with it really aren't great, so I had to improvise some of my way through it. Now, let's go ahead and look at kind of the way that it's set up and some of the modifications that I've had to make to get it to work. Now, I will say this might not be typical of all of them. I was missing a piece or two that needed to come with it. So any of the parts that I bought or modifications I made, I'll link the parts in the description so that you can check them out. So I have found that it is sealed up pretty well. So well that it doesn't actually open because that is the rubber seal back here is actually coming off on the door, and it does get hard to open. So that's something that's not ideal, but something I can work with. Now, from a design standpoint, this actually had silicone around all the edges out here. So everything was siliconed in a way that it actually hasn't been leaking, but it did come with an entire tube of silicone sealant in case I needed to add more. I haven't found I needed to do that just because of probably the thicker media I'm using, as well as the fact that it's already sealed in a lot of different locations. So one of the first modifications that I did to this is I actually replaced this tube. The tube that it came with is right here, and it's a hard line tube with hose clamps, and it goes onto barbs like this. And it's for me, I mean, it'll work. You can make it work, but this isn't the setup that I would use or I would recommend. Putting a hose clamp on a hard line like this, sure, I'm sure it'll work, but having 90 psi in there onto this barb and then onto a barb on the gun, it just wasn't ideal for me. So I ended up replacing that out because it was leaking a lot. Now, as I was doing that, I also ended up replacing this right here. So Instead of using the fitting that they gave you, which had an O-ring on fitting on one side and then this gasket on the other, I ended up replacing it with a bulkhead fitting. Now that bulkhead fitting is in there and it's installed in there, and it's a NPT bulkhead fitting, so it's sealing on either side and it's straight through, and it is a larger orifice than this piece right here. So I ended up swapping that out for the other one. Now with that modification, I also had to replace the drain plug in the bottom of it. You can see the drain plug I'm using here. I actually bought it off Amazon. It's a 30 millimeter just plug that just dropped right in. It's been sealing it pretty well. Now I did actually get to experience draining the media out of this, because when I originally purchased this, I went with some coarse media, which says it works. And I tried it in this, I couldn't get it to stop jamming up in the gun. So I ended up replacing it with some fine walnut shells, and I haven't had any issues since. But because I did that, I got some experience with actually filling this up. And the filling isn't that bad. The draining's a little bit more of a problem, but it's really not too bad. Now, what I found when I was doing a drain of it is the drain for it is on the bottom. So I had to dig my hand through the bottom to get to that plug and to pull it to get everything to drain out. Now I think this is the way that they intended to work. I didn't get the original plug, so I'm assuming this is the way that it works. But everything drained out pretty quickly, and I was happy with that experience. The only thing that I didn't like about it is, I did have to move it to get everything to drain, because unlike the other ones, it doesn't have like a giant area down there that's open, especially if you're putting it on a bench top. Now what I had to do is I had to put it hanging off the bench a little bit, and by doing that in this corner, I was able to drain everything out. And then what's typical with a lot of these is after you have to drain everything out, since it was causing an issue and it was clogging up the gun, I had to take a vacuum and I had to go through and vacuum everything out of there just to make sure that none of the media was going to get back in there and get stuck. Now you can see the light in the back there. I was really happy with this light. Now it provides good light for working within the blast cabinet, and I think it works really well. It's nice that it looks like it's an LED light, not a fluorescent. I'm not 100% sure. No, that's most likely an LED light. Provides good light in there that's adequate, and I was able to do some sandblasting without any issues. Now on this side, they do have an exit port here for vacuum. If you're looking to get something for it, this is 2.5-inch OD, so you need something that slips on the top or goes on the inside. I did end up taking a lot of the silicone sealant and using it around here, because this is only surface mounted. It wasn't really clear in the directions on which way it goes, but I went back to the store when I was looking for something else, and I did see that this is the way that the one in the store was installed. So I'm assuming they got that correct there and that this is installed correctly. Now putting this in was kind of a pain. I actually ended up taping these up, and because you have to be able to reach in. So either you're reaching in all the way from that side, or you are using these gloves to hold the nuts in place as you're screwing the screw in and tightening it. It was a little bit of a pain, but it was doable. Now I've been using it for a few weeks now. I've had it on multiple projects. The most recent project I'm doing is on the 1969 Mustang. I'm restoring a power steering pump for it. The reservoir that's on there isn't the correct one for the car, so I've replaced it. Actually, I have it right here. So I've replaced it with a new one, and actually an old one. So this is an original Ford part, but it was all rusty and it was kind of crusted up and it needed to be cleaned up. So that's where the walnut blasting came in. Now, from that, I blasted not only the can itself, but I also blasted this, I don't know, I think it's an aluminum holder for the power steering pump. Now, for that bracket, everything cleaned up really nice. I probably could have used some more tougher material than the walnuts that I've been using, but on the can, it did a really good job. Now, my goal was to not damage any of the can while I was blasting it, because I needed to clean it up, but I didn't want to leave any marks on it. So the walnut media worked very well. Now, I was able to clean it enough so that I could actually see and paint the Ford Moco logo on the back. So I was able to get all the material out of that, and it came out really good. So I'm really happy with that. Now, the gun with the fine media didn't clog. I did have issues with coarse media, as I was saying earlier, but I ended up replacing that and then using it on this. Now, after doing it, it's a sandblaster, so it does make a little bit of a mess. One of the things I noticed and that I did like about this cabinet is it didn't really make a mess of the shop or my garage here. The only places where I made a mess is when I was refilling it myself and dumping some of it out the side. But it's done a pretty good job containing all the media inside. I am using walnut shells, a little bit on the larger side. Maybe they're not going to get out as much, but I did notice that compared to the other sandblast cabinets that they offer, this one was already sealed up, which was nice. I don't know if it's because I got one of the earlier models or one of the first models, but it has nice beads of the silicone sealing all the way around the outside. Now, one of the negative things that I've noticed about it while using these walnut shells is as I was using it, the way that it picks up the media is there's a tube that goes all the way from the top down to the bottom where the media is. And it's supposed to pick up the media directly off the bottom. It tends to create kind of a little cavity in there if you don't have enough of the media in there. So I had to keep putting more and more media in, trying to find out what the right balance is. Haven't found it yet. But I've noticed that a lot of the media does go to one side if you're shooting on one side. I mean, simple physics. But there must be some way for me to improve that down there so that the media flows a little bit better back to the center. That's something that I need to work on. Maybe later I'll do another video of further modifications that I've done to it. Now the question is going to be, is it worth the $200 I paid? Yes, in my opinion, it's definitely worth $200. You know, a lot of the modifications that I made probably didn't need to be made. I'm more of someone that's nitpicky around like small leaks and stuff like that. So by me making these modifications, it's more making it better for me rather than 100% necessary for you to do. So in my opinion, 200 bucks, good deal. All in all, I'm really happy with the way that this machine has been working. It's a great addition to pretty much any home garage. And you know, it's great for a hobbyist. This is something that I could see myself using more and more often. The only thing I'd caveat that with is if you're looking at one of these, make sure you have an air compressor that can keep up with the project that you're running. With the compressor that I have now, I can pretty much run continuously and not have to worry about running out of air. But you know, if you have a smaller compressor, there's a good chance that you might not be able to run something big like this. Or you could run it, you just won't get the best experience out of it, or you'll be running low on air at some point. Thanks for tuning in to Smackey's Garage. If you want to know more about this or you want me to follow up with any modifications on it, let me know down in the comments. Thanks for tuning in. I'll see you next time.